Hello everyone, this is Meg at Chasing Retro, and today I am prepping the covers for the junk journals that are rain themed, and I thought that I would bring you along. I don't know that I've done a process video of how I put the little golden book slash hardcover children's books together to make a journal, so I thought I would do that and sort of explain the process as I go along. There may be some interruptions. I'm waiting to hear from one of my children who is helping with something at our church. And then when he is done, we are going to run to Lowe's to get some plants. So if this ends up being a two-parter, that's why, or I may end up just stopping it and starting it again later. Okay, so I think I'm going to start with this one, even though this one is probably going to be the hardest one for me to cut up because it is such a glorious old little golden book. However, it is in pretty rough shape, as you can see, so I don't feel terrible about it. I feel like this is a way, making it into a journal is a way that I can preserve the book. And so the pages are actually in great shape. There is some writing, but I don't like to cover over these vintage covers. I may put a little something right here, or I may end up just putting a little book plate. I'm not sure, but look at that. There's the color kitten. So yes, the first thing, let me go over everything that you need to do this. The first thing you need is a cutting mat and or protection for your work surface. I have a self-healing cutting mat, but this is really weird, but I don't really like cutting on this unless I'm doing like a fussy cut, tiny little job. I don't like to do huge slash cuts in it just because I know it's self-healing, but eventually it will need replacing, and so I'm preserving the life as long as I can. So I've just taken one of these IKEA cutting boards that I used to use in the kitchen and made it into my craft cutting board. And so to go along with that, you will need an X-Acto knife or a craft knife. This one may be dull. We'll see as we get into it if I need to change the blade. You'll need paper towels. You'll need two kinds of glue. You can probably get by with just one kind, but I like to use both of these for different purposes in this process. You'll need a pencil or a pen. You'll need scissors that can cut through chipboard. You will need a ruler, and you will also need, let's see if I can find it real quick. You will need a pair of pliers, which I'm gonna have to run in the back and get. My daughter borrowed them last night for jewelry. This is just, a lot of people use butter knives, but this is just an old Pampered Chef icing spatula. So this will be what you use to help pry the book apart from the staples. Let me run and grab the craft knife. The pliers. Okay, here they are. These are just standard pliers. I guess they would be called needle nose pliers. And then the other thing that my son always makes sure that I grab when I do this job is a pair of safety glasses. Sometimes I use my reading glasses if the light is bad, just because I can't see as well, and I feel like they sort of protect my eyes, but if you have a pair of these, grab them. Okay, every golden book is put together a little differently. Almost all of them are stapled. A few of them are glued. I've only come across one like that, but for the most part, the old ones like this are stapled. A lot of people save the foil. I normally don't do that. If I do, I save it in pieces and I use it in a collage or a masterboard, but I don't try to preserve the entire thing in one piece. Plus, this one is a lot different than the later foils. They're a little wider and they have cuter images on them. So I'm not worried about letting go of this one. So the first thing you need to do is you need to sort of pry your book loose and get the covers off of the pages. There's really no easy way to do this. You're gonna feel like you're destroying the book, honestly. The first few times I did this, it was very difficult for me to do emotionally. I kept feeling like I was going to just mess it up. Diane Shaw on Shawcraft 1 is probably the person that made me comfortable with doing this, and honestly, she just had really good tutorials about this, and so I highly recommend using her. If you have never done this, she's gonna do a much better job than I am of showing you exactly what to do. She uses a butter knife. So as you can see, it's starting to sort of pry away. Now is when I like to sort of go and find the back of the staple on the, you can kind of scrape away. Be careful doing this. I have taken off chunks of my skin on my thumb doing this before. Let's see, I have a, sometimes a small flathead screwdriver comes in handy. See, like right here, if I were to use my craft knife for this job, it may snap my blade. So this is just a better way to lift up these sometimes rusty staples. Y'all be careful and make sure that you have had your tetanus shot, tetanus booster. I make sure I get mine every 10 years, but just because I'm out in the garden a lot, you just never know what you're gonna get cut on. All right, so see how these staples are lifted up? Let's make sure this is showing okay. So now it's gonna be a much easier job to sort of pop this back off. I may not even need this knife. Almost got it. Here we go, look. And it's already separated from the front cover, which very rarely happens. Usually you have to cut those apart after you remove. But like I said, this book has been very, very, very used. It is probably starting to just fall apart on its own. So now we're gonna take the front off, and because the staple's already bent out, it should be an easy job for you. See how rusty that is? Okay, now we need to grab the staple and remove it. Actually, you probably don't even have to if you're gonna throw this part away. So let's just do that, because I do plan, I'm not keeping the foil. Also, I've noticed on these older golden books, the covers are thinner, less millimeters, so they're not gonna be quite as sturdy of a book. You know, there are people that might not like that. They may want a sturdier cover. I guess you could bolster it in some way, but I'm gonna leave this as is. So now I just use my ruler as a metal straight edge, and I continue. I can't really show you on the other side because of the staples, but I'm finding the natural place where the paper sort of dips down, and that shows you where the edge of the chipboard is. And you are going to lose a little bit of the image on the front, a little bit more once we add the fabric, but there are tutorials out there, and there are makers out there who are able to preserve the entire cover. I think that is fantastic. That's not really what I like to do. I like the size of the pages folded when I shorten it like this. But if you like to preserve more of the entire cover, then by all means, go check out the other videos on this, and there are some great tutorials on how to preserve more of the, in other words, they would bolster this somehow, and this entire thing would become your cover instead of starting it here. I just think that makes for a little bit wider book, and a little bit, for me, a little more of a fuss as far as getting pages to fit without you know, having too much space at the edge of the book. Okay, so now we have deconstructed the cover. I always sort of stack them up to make sure that I did it right, and they should be about the same size. They're gonna be a little off, that's just fine. Here is a piece of that foil, so I'll probably set this aside and use it. And take a sip of coffee. today called for an afternoon cup. I don't know if y'all have morning cups only. Some days, for me, I have to have afternoon coffee or tea. So, if you'll notice, this one is set up like most little golden books. There are 2 signatures, and they are already together. So if you put them in your book, just like this, the story will be completely in order. With this journal, I have not completely decided if I'm going to use all of the pages in this story, just because, of course I will use the cover page, because look at this. But the rest of them, honestly, there's not a lot of pictures of rain. These children are having fun inside the house on a rainy day, which is cool. But if I want this to be a rain journal, I'm probably going to limit myself to only pages that are showing rain. You know what? Is this one a double page? This one may be set up weird. This has an extra page in it. This happens sometimes. So you have these beautiful, already together folded signatures, but look, we have this oddball here, and this second one may have the same thing going on. Let's check. Yep, we have a lone wolf. So if that happens and you want to keep your story together, you're going to have to hinge that page to another page and put it in your book to keep it in order and to keep that page from, obviously it needs a partner in order to be folded and put in your journal. Now there's lots of ways that you can keep your pages as is. Like right now, watch this. You're gonna have to do some amends. Here's why I say that. If I were to make a journal right now with these pages, because we cut that foil off, look what happens. You have all of this extra hanging off. So there's probably more than 2, but there's 2 main things you can do. Number 1, you can keep the fold where it is. Okay, sorry about that. I heard a noise in the back and I wanted to make sure my kitty cat was not like falling out the open window that I have back there. I have the screens down, but the window's up. Okay, so you can fold the pages like this. You'll have to fold them about 1 inch in, or this way. And that just provides some interest, like you'll have a little place to tuck things. Or you can do, I don't think I want to do this page because then it will leave a fold. Let's see if I can do this one. There's a certain way you can fold it. You're gonna fold it like this, about 1/2 inch. Then you're gonna fold it back on itself. This is sort of hard to explain. I hope you can see what I just did. Basically, I sort of did an accordion fold in the middle, okay? And so what you do now is you will, a lot of times I'll sew with like a zigzag stitch. I'll sew right here. You can also glue a piece of washi tape here. And then inside here, if this bothers you, because this is gonna be sticking up, you can glue it down or you can sew it down. It's up to you. But that is a way to keep the entire page without a fold on the end. But I'm not going to show that in this video. This video is just mainly going to be how to prepare the cover. All right, so here's our little cover. I use this cutting board also as a straight edge to line everything up. All right, so these journals are going to be 2 signatures, and for 2 signatures I like to do a 1.5 inch spine. So that would be about, do I have it right? Almost. About right here. Now what we need to do is we need to build back a new spine, because obviously we took the old one out and we're making a larger one. So the things that you'll need for this, I don't think I showed these at the beginning, I'm so sorry. You will need chipboard. This is chipboard that I ordered off of Amazon. It's fairly thin. You don't have to buy it from Amazon. In fact, please don't. I wish I could have the $10 back I spent on this. You can use a cracker or a cereal box. And if it's a really thick box, you may only need 1 layer instead of 2. Then, as an extra protection, you will need a Kevlar, I think this is called Kevlar, Tyvek, not Kevlar is what you use when you go hunting in the rain, I think. This is called Tyvek, and it is basically impossible to rip. You can get these United States Postal Service priority mail envelopes for free on their website. That's probably the best and cheapest way to do it. You can buy rolls of Tyvek if you want to spend the money. But because I use these to mail things anyway, I figured I could use a few of them and cut them up and use them as a spine bolster. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to cut 2 strips that are 1.5 inches wide by 7 7/8, which is pretty typical for a little golden book. Okay, so we can move this out of the way for a second. I use an older pair of scissors for this just because I don't want to use my nice paper scissors. Chipboard dulls it a little faster. Okay, so with my pencil, I'll mark 1.5 and then another 1.5. I'll go down and do that again. And 1 more for good measure. Then I connect it. Sometimes it's hard to see your lines if the chipboard has these little recycled spots on it. Okay, and then I said 7 7/8, didn't I? So here we go. I'll make sure I did that right. Make sure I was lined up with the 0. I was not. I was lined up with the edge of the ruler. Oh, this is the pencil that does not erase good. I think it's a Dollar Tree pencil, and the eraser is terrible. Okay. Now we just cut them out. That looks crooked to me. Why does that look crooked to me? It is a little bit crooked. Weird. This is why I don't like to measure, because even when I measure, it's not right. This part of journal making honestly stresses me out. I much prefer the free art, creative, open-minded collage, no measuring required. When you get math involved, it takes some of the joy out of journal making, but I understand you have to have math in order to make the journal, you know, a book. Okay, well, that's not terrible. Lining it up, they're almost exactly the same. So now what you do is you're gonna glue these 2 together. I use tacky glue for this. You can use any glue you'd like, but I just feel like I try to preserve my Fabri-Tac for more of the tasks that require, you know, quick drying, and also if I don't want the glue to show through, Fabri-Tac's real good about drying fairly invisible. This one, unless you spread it really thin, which I usually do for the fabric part of the spine, it will leave, you'll just be able to see the glue. So that's why I use this one for this job. Also, it's just cheap. I mean, $1.79 versus $7.99 for a bottle. That's a big difference. gonna try to slip and slide on you, but just press it together the best you can. So now we have a double layer reinforced piece of 1.5 inch spine. I just looked over and saw my safety glasses sitting there on the desk, and I did not use them when I pulled the staples out. It's not second nature to me. And if I was in a workshop with saws and drills, yes, I would wear them. But for some reason, when I'm sitting at my craft desk, I have a hard time like remembering to put on safety glasses. Alrighty. So constantly throughout this entire process, you'll find me doing this because I have done this before. I have glued it wrong, upside down. It's just not good. So constantly kind of second guess yourself when you're putting this up and lining it together, because you want to make sure you're gluing it the right way. Okay, for this part, now there are all kinds of fancy tools you can buy to help you space this the right way. Again, I don't really find it necessary. If you've got eyeballs and you can kind of see, and you have something to line it up with at the bottom that's straight, I don't feel like you need all that fancy stuff. I leave about 1/8 or maybe a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch. That's probably a little bit less than 1/8. And I leave it just like that. And then I get my Tyvek ready. This is the first time I've used this envelope, so I'm gonna cut it apart first. These are my dull scissors, and they're showing. Okay. So here we go. I don't measure this part either. I sort of just eyeball it. It needs to be about right here. And then needs to be about right here. Probably should measure this part though, because that's a long way to cut without knowing. 2 3/4. Let's draw a line. Unless you have really long scissor blades, that's a long way to go. Trying to look at it just with your eyeball. Okay. Not perfect, not entirely straight on the edge. That's fine. I've got a fold here though. We don't want that. Let me cut this off. Forgot about the fold. All right, let's make sure that this will cover what we need it to cover. You want it to go about 1/2 inch onto the, maybe a little less, onto the each side of the book. You're just using this to help grab and hold together the two covers, and then the fabric will obviously be the solidifying factor to everything, as well as provide an attractive spine. I usually flip it this way because if you do have a light colored fabric, sometimes this will show through. And you can paint this. You can paint this white if that is going to be a big deal, if you're doing like a sheer white fabric, which I would not recommend, but you know, sometimes it calls for that. It's just a little bit too far apart. Here we go. Okay, here's where I use my Fabri-Tac. Just because it dries faster and I feel like it's a little more of a permanent bond. I try to do it pretty quick. I also don't use my finger to smear it around just because this stuff has chemicals and I don't want it to touch my skin. So I just sort of use the bottle to smear it, and I go, oops, I just shifted my entire thing. Did y'all see that? Let me fix it. Okay. Hold this very gently so you won't move it. Oh, I shifted it again. It's really hard not to, y'all. Sometimes it makes you want to say bad words, honestly. You know how some days you feel like you're a bull in a china shop and okay, perfect example. Like everything you touch just moves. That's how I feel some days, including this one. All right, here we go. Let's set it down. Now, I didn't get all the way to the edge here, as you can see. So you can always go back and get that later. The key is just to get this first part down before it dries. A old credit card or some sort of rewards card is ideal for this part because it helps you get a really good bond. It helps you put it into that crease as well. And this will be more important when we get to the fabric. So after that, you look at it this way and you can turn it this way. Now look at this. I'm not real happy with the way this was sort of drifting this way. So with Fabri-Tac, you do have a few minutes where you can slide it around. So I just slid it a little bit more this way at the top. And now I can make sure that it's down again. You do have probably about 1.5 minutes of work time after you place it. Possibly also because the Tyvek is slippery and it sort of lets you move it around. Okay, so I leave this to dry just like this while I start looking at fabrics. You don't want to mess with it too much while it's bonding. I'll be right back with my fabric. Okay, I'm back and I have gathered a few of the fabrics that I have in my stash that I thought might look good with this cover. Honestly, this is a really, really hard thing for me to do. It's fun, but I find it a little overwhelming sometimes because I have so many fabrics. I sort of have a fabric obsession. And so many of them tend to look good with the cover. So to make it a little bit easier on myself, I try to limit myself to 7 or 8 possibilities and then weed them out. So we can do that together now. All right, let me move this over. So I have a couple, actually I picked 3 ginghams that might work. So I always lay it next to the cover and I look to see if it harmonizes with the colors of the cover, but I also want it to feel like it goes with the theme of the journal. And so when I think about rain, I think about blue, gray, white, you know, those types of colors, which a lot of this is. But as you'll also see, there's a little pop of red and then there's some green. So we could always use those colors also. So this is one possibility. This is a sort of duck cloth that I have, and it looks kind of like raindrops, and it also resembles what she's wearing. So this is another possibility. Move it over a little more. Here's another gingham, but instead of blue and white, it's a darker blue with a lighter blue, which is also super cute. It's a little thinner. I'm not a huge fan of using really thin fabrics on the cover. I prefer something a little bulkier. So because of that, I would probably set this one to the side in my no-go pile. Now, I love this one. I've used this one before on spines. And though I think it looks really well with the colors, it doesn't really fit the theme. We've got flowers, of course, but again, this looks like a sunny spring day to me, and this is a rainy day book, so I will also set this one aside. Here's another gingham. This one's a little bit thicker. So we'll keep this in the possible pile. And then the last one, I decided to pull some of the green. I actually got this fabric to line a straw bag with, and I ended up not wanting to line the bag. I just decided it was not really worth the trouble. The liner that was in the bag was fine, so I just kept it. So now I have this beautiful piece of fabric. This is not vintage, this is Joann's. But I got it because it reminds me of the floors in my grandparents' house before they redid everything in the 90s when the house was built in the 60s. It had this linoleum floor that looked like this, but it was a little more olive. It kind of also reminds me of a stained glass window or the design on the bottom of a swimming pool. I don't know if you guys see that or not. I don't know if Joann still has these. I think they had them in several color waves if you like this fabric. I just think it's super interesting. So I'm going to ponder on these four for a little while. Probably going to ask my daughter because she is an artist and has an eye and a knack for color, and I'll come back with what I have picked out. I've decided to use this large gingham. Several reasons. Number one, I think the colors just go really well with it, and it gives it a very homey, cozy, you know, just vintage retro vibe to it. And the colors are just beautiful. It sort of harmonizes with what they're wearing, and it is a thick material, so it's going to be a good substantial fabric for the spine. So what you do is you want to make sure that you have enough to cover all the way around the book. Okay, so you measure it like this if you want to cut exactly. In my case, I'm just going to cut a strip, or rip a strip rather, and then I'll have enough left over to do other things with, like use for parts of a tassel or something. So you also want to make sure that it's wide enough to cover your Tyvek that you just put down. So you can use this sort of as a guide to know how far across to make it. The gingham helps because you've got these blocks to help you cut straight. But I like the raw torn edge look, so I'm going to do that. So what you do is you just start a little bit of a cut and then tear. Okay, so again, this is way more than I need, but I prefer to do it this way so I can get a cut edge on all four sides. And again, I'm going to use the fabric anyway. Then you'll end up with some extra strings here. It will continue to unravel, but I'd like to just pull the first 3 or 4 out. I love the look of raw edge on a fabric. Some people don't like that. Some people do this or cut it straight and then they'll glue rickrack or something like that, and I have done that before too, but to me, I just like this look. Okay, so we have a raw edge here, we have a cut edge here, so this will be the side that I cut off, or rip off rather, once I figure out how long I need to make it. So you want enough fabric to come around, pulling it tight so that it overlaps just slightly, maybe an inch or so, without trailing out the bottom of the book. So right here, it looks like I need to cut right there. Sometimes it does that if you don't cut it enough. Some fabrics are easier to rip than others too. Okay, there's my extra piece. This one kind of got bent out of shape. So let's fix it. Oops, we got some more raveling happening. I want to unravel all of it because then I'll have to cut a new piece. And then you'll have some little strange pieces that are hanging off. You can just cut those. All right, before I start gluing it, I'm gonna make sure it's still wide enough and long enough. Because once you start gluing, it's gonna be virtually impossible to pull it back up. That looks perfect. Okay, so the order that I like to do it is I lay it like this, and then I put this right here. Again, you can use the bottom of the cutting board as a guide to make sure you have the fabric and the book straight. And I fold this piece up right here, and I glue this down. Okay, this is where I use my Fabri-Tac glue, and I do, you know what, let's glue this down first. I said that I was gonna do that and I did not. We're just gonna glue the edge of this down. That one's almost done right here. This one's not quite as lifted up as the other side. All right. Oop, my glue is trying to explode. See it? No, sir. All right. So you want to make sure that you have it exactly in the middle. The spine needs to be exactly in the middle of the fabric. And it appears to be so. If you want to be exact, you can measure the edge of the fabric to the edge of the front cover. That looks like 3/4 of an inch. 3/4 of an inch. That is exactly the middle. My glue's getting low. Sorry, y'all. That's what I get for setting the glue bottle upright while I was working. Okay, now I just smooth it out like that because you don't want to have big globs coming through your fabric. See, just like that. Make sure it is all the way to the edge at the bottom. Okay, and we're not going to glue this because the other side is not glued down yet. After I get this secured, that's when I flip it over and I glued this side. You can kind of tell how far in to go with the glue based on where the fabric is hitting at the top. Also, be sure you put some in that crease or the gap between the book and the spine piece. I have to cover up Mickey. I'm sorry, Mickey. And Bugs Bunny. Okay. This part is the fun part. It reminds me of being in preschool when you just got glue all over your hands all the time. I loved that. All right, see how I smoothed it and there's no gaps or anything? We're going to pull this tight, not too tight, just pulling it taut, making sure it is straight as much as I can tell with my eyes. It's easier with this fabric because it has straight lines. Then you're going to use your card, and this is where you want to put it inside the crease right here to make sure it is getting it all the way secured. Okay, working somewhat quickly, we're now going to flip the book and glue the rest of it down. And sometimes that happens. As you can see, it feels like it's shifted a little bit. It may be that I didn't get it exactly straight. Again, if I wanted to make it mathematically perfect, I would measure everything. But to me, that defeats the purpose of a junk journal. I love it because it's so imperfect. And you want to put some on top of this fabric too, because it's going to go down on top of that. Can y'all hear my daughter's parakeet? She is very happy today because the windows are open and she has bird friends outside. She's very happy. All right, so we have it lined up. Isn't that so cute? So adorable. There's just something about gingham. It's just so cute. This is almost like a tablecloth material. All right, so we have the creases. I usually don't go back and glue all this down until everything else is dry. No big deal, no reason why. This just gives a little bit of, and some people like to leave that too. So for drying, I found out the hard way not to let it dry like this. Some people do. But I have found that sometimes on really old books, if I do that, when I stand them up the next day or even 2 hours later and do this, I've had it actually pull and rip and separate the paper. So when I dry my little golden books, I usually set them somewhere like this, like that, where it's not completely open, it's not completely closed. Now, you may want to go back and look and say, oh, look, this is trying to buckle a little bit. And if that happens, just crease it back. Like I said, you've got some wiggle room and some dry time with this glue. If that bubble doesn't bother you, then leave it. But I like to just go in and smooth it just a little bit. And I'll leave it like this to dry. And then when you go to close it later, when it's completely dry, it will, sometimes this little bubble just refuses to go anywhere. But you need some flexibility right here. You really do. You need to get it good in here, but you also need some flexibility because if you have it completely tight and there's no air gap at all, then it will rip your book when you go to close it. So I'm going to leave it like this until it is dry. And then overnight preferably, but you can do it as low as, a couple of hours. If you use Fabri-Tac, less time. This tacky glue just takes longer to dry. And then after this step, I'm not going to show all of the next steps because there are billions of videos on it, but that's when you'll close your book and start to measure and see how big you need to cut your pages to fit inside. So I hope this tutorial of sorts, it's not really a tutorial, it's just an explanation of how I make these, has helped you, and I hope that you feel less intimidated about cutting up or pulling apart a vintage little golden book. This also works for Wonder books, Junior Elf books, anything like that. And typically I have found that 1.5 inch spine is perfect for a 2 signature junk journal. But you can always make a much bigger one. I've made 3 and 4 signature junk journals out of these as well, and that works out beautifully. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Share this video if you would like to. to help others in their junk journaling journey. And I will talk to you soon.